Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejan Sarowick. Sejan?
Hey man, what's going on?
It's going to be an episode of the Say Report tonight. That's what we want to promise the listener. That we are here to record for you an episode of the Say Report. I'm sorry. We're supposed to be celebrating the end of Brendan Fraser History Month. It has been 5 years celebrating Brendan Fraser History Month here on the Say Report. And I'm very excited to do that, but I made a mistake today. Do you want to venture a guess what that mistake was, CJ?
Involving Brendan Fraser? Did you I don't know? Did you dive into like the disappearance of him for a while from film and television? Because that would definitely send me down a dark hole.
That was part of it. But the real mistake, the central mistake, the mistake I have to own up to, is that I watched Flashdance. Like immediately before we started recording this episode. No. Actually, the real mistake, and I'm going to fix this mistake right now, is I put on a baseball cap backwards and then put my headphones over it. I'm not Joe Rogan. I don't want to be Joe Rogan, so I have to not do that. Sejan?
Oh, sorry. I was trying to look up Flashdance to see if I could figure out, because in my head, I get it confused with Footloose a lot, right? Like people say Flashdance, and the first thought in my head is like Kevin Bacon and Chris Penn like dancing in a field somewhere, but that's not Flashdance. That's a different one. So I was gonna ask which one you watched, but there is only one version of it, right?
There's only one Flashdance. There's never been a remake of Flashdance. I don't think there ever could or would be a remake of Flashdance, which is kind of sad. If I had to be completely honest.
I did find a 1985 film called Flashdance. Let's see if that has anything to do with it.
I bet it's what they call now XXX porn parody of Flashdance.
I mean, it's on IMDb, like pretty. I guess that doesn't mean much.
I mean, if it's a production and it's recognized, you can just submit anything to IMDb. Like we treat IMDb like it's supposed to be some holy grail of movie information. But anyone can submit anything to IMDb. And if you can prove that it played somewhere, and that's not even a stipulation to be included on the site anymore. Like, that was it back in the early days when I first discovered it in high school. But now, like, direct-to-TV or just video is what it will say in the parentheses, meaning it's a YouTube video or similar.
Well, right. Yeah, the internet, right.
Yeah,
they have to acknowledge that stuff because there is a lot of internet TV. We've talked about it ourselves. Hell, even, one of our own big tenets of the Brendan Fraser history has been Doom Patrol, which was only available as a streaming program when it first started.
Exactly. Yeah. But no, and this all comes from the reason why Flashdance happened was Family Feud was on, right? It's Memorial Day. We're recording this on Memorial Day. It was a do-nothing day. Right? Mm-hmm. I took a drive to Newport to visit Fort Adams and, thank those for their service, right? Doing what Memorial Day is about. Thanking those who've died and who fought for this country. So thank you from the Say Report. And then I got home and just kind of flirped out on the couch, not really doing anything, just seeing what was on daytime television. Because when you have a job, you don't watch daytime television. And I can't prove it now. It's for a later episode of the Say Report. But I'm pretty sure if you're like watching nothing but daytime television, it's going to be difficult for you to get another job too. Like there's something in that. There's something in the commercials or in the radio waves from those shows that just get in the way. I mean, I remember when I used to watch a lot of Maury when I was unemployed. That's got to be something. There's got to be something there. People don't want to go back to work,
man. It's like you're talking about getting addicted to just like TV and couch sits, which is something that happens to people for sure. Yeah.
So watching Family Feud, and the question was, name a job you would be surprised a stripper did by day. And what do you think the number one answer was? Let's see if he's the number one answer. Well, that's what my guess would be, but the number one answer was school teacher. So Varsity Blues. I could have also gone down a Varsity Blues path.
Well, but also not an unusual thing that we now know because of, again, the internet. We are learning more and more that there's a lot of teachers out there with things like OnlyFans pages and things like that. And like my belief is more power to them. If like the fact that they can't survive on a teacher's salary alone and feel the need to do jobs like that is one thing, definitely a conversation to be had. But that's actually, I guess you said the question was what would surprise you. That wouldn't surprise
Yeah,
me.
exactly. That's the thing. So like welder is surprising. It's
Right.
surprising that Jennifer Beals welds by day and works at a dance club by night, because she doesn't work in a strip club. Like she works at a burlesque house.
It is an exotic dancing. I think that is the term I think that is used on the back of the box, if I'm not
But
mistaken.
it's not Zanzibar. Zanzibar is totally nudes guy.
Mhm.
Like there's a whole, like Flashdance is this crazy movie. It really is. And I'd love to do a full episode, but like, so they do that. And of course, I think welder, right? There's 7 answers on the board. I assume welder has to be one of those 7. Like they had to have gotten 1 or 2 jokey people who responded to that, right? With welder.
Exactly.
Welder
right.
Wasn't any of them.
Jesus.
School teacher, doctor, nurse, lawyer, other ones that like weren't super surprising. Number 7,
like cross-Atlantic ships captain. Like that would be mine. like you want something that surprises you. Like these are all second jobs most people take.
Astronaut, theoretical physicist, host of Jeopardy. Like those would be surprising. These are all kind of jobs that, you know, in the beginning don't really pay well and come with a lot of bills. So you might be subsidizing your income by dancing at night. And then the last one, number 7, was daycare worker, and 2 people said that, but nobody said welder. Not a single person said welder. And that was disappointing to me. So then I flipped, and there's Flashdance, and I'm like, well, now I'm going to watch Flashdance. Screw you, Family Feud.
The world has come together to tell you that it was time to watch Flashdance.
Yeah, and it's been about 10 years since I've watched Flashdance. It's good, but we'll talk about it when it's not Brendan Fraser History Month. But I'm distracted because here's what we're going to do. Here's what this episode of the Stay Report, part of what this episode of the Stay Report is going to be. And I think Sejan's going to agree with this. Every May for the last 5 years, right? And we're not talking about the musical the last 5 years. This is the only time it's getting mentioned. So if you got a last 5 years joke, Siege, and you drop it right here, right now.
Which direction am I moving in?
Ooh.
All right, so, let's go.
Damn. The last 5 years, every May has been Brendan Fraser History Month on the Say Report. And I always tell my friends and family and relations that May is my hard month. I have been doing that since the beginning of the Say Report because I put a lot of effort and energy into making Brendan Fraser History Month happen. It's not.
Yeah, man. this is a project. We you know, like most jokes on this show for us, they start off as just like something that we say to each other on air, and then suddenly we find ourselves 2 years later neck deep in something that is actually consuming a lot of our time and effort. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is. It's something that I put a lot of time into. Plus, I work in education, and May is graduation. So, like, I chose the wrong month for Brendan Fraser History Month 6 years ago when it started on a joke on the Super Kenshi podcast with Sejan's old podcast, his OG podcast. I picked the wrong month to do it because I didn't think about, you know, if this were to become a thing, Devin, you're busy at the beginning of the month because of graduation stuff, and then you're busy at the end of the month because of like grades and other things, and like getting people enrolled in classes and making sure that things went forward. So like it wasn't great, but it was this year. It was this 5th year of Brendan Fraser when someone sent me a picture, right? They sent me a meme and a video, and I hadn't been responding to them. I had gotten like 4 meme pictures and a video from them. It was Zach, our friend over at Board with Friends, the board game podcast that has grown into to focus on some other things, media related, which I think all podcasts end up doing. I think that's just part of it. And I said, I'm really sorry.
We started off without having a focus, so we were already beating the game. But yes,
exactly.
Yes,
we knew that if we just make it a show about everything, we can check that box real easily. Yeah. So. And I responded to him, and I'm like, I'm really sorry I haven't been getting back to these. Like, it's May, and he's like, I know it's your hard month, right? He's like, but do you want me to not send them? And I'm like, oh no, please continue to send them. Just know that in June you're going to get a big freaking response from me about everything that you've been sending me. Know that everything you send me, I will look at it on June 1st and give you a response. But I'm not, like, right now, it's like I'm in space. I have to be in space. And I am in space. I am in the headspace of Brendan Fraser History Month. And then on top of that, as the show has grown, right? Like, we've taken on more responsibilities.
Oh yeah, don't think we've learned our lesson from any of this. I mean, take a look at the Adam Sandler cinematic universe, which started as a joke on the show, and then 2 months later was an actual product that we were producing. Yeah.
So now we have to do an Adam Sandler cinematic universe episode in addition to all the Brendan Fraser History Month stuff that we're already doing. But then, just because we're assholes, I guess, I think it's because we're assholes, we decided that one very special episode every 2 months wasn't good enough. And let's be honest, I'll take full responsibility of that. I thought we were talking about too many movies, and if we put in more very special episodes, we talk about other things. So far, that has not been the case. And I will take full responsibility for that, but I also want a little bit of credit has to be thrown towards the fact that we're still living in COVID times, and a lot of the stuff we've done have been new releases that got very special episodes, and they're allowed to get them right when they happen because there's no wait anymore. There's not a 90-day period before I can watch it 4 times at my computer taking extensive notes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, in addition to that, we have not been able to go out and expand our horizons in any real way. So it's also just been like, what can we do while sitting at our computer for 24 hours a day?
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, someone said that we've been, one criticism I've gotten that we've done a lot of television-focused stuff. We can't go out into the world. Right?
Yeah,
so,
I mean, like, I'd love to talk about like a restaurant that I could try out here, or like a concert that I've been to. Like, very first episode of our show ever, I got to talk about going to see Kesha, which was an amazing experience. Guess what I couldn't do this year? I couldn't do things like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's just one of those strange things. And because you're stuck at home and linked to exclusively media, it's kind of an excuse to try out things you maybe wouldn't have tried out before.
Mm.
Like Doom Patrol. I finally convinced my family to watch Doom Patrol. They stopped afterwards, but yeah. So just, that's the headspace. I wanted to explain the headspace that we get into. And one of the main reasons I wanted to explain that headspace is because the first week of Brendan Fraser History Month, it was Monday. This morning I watched the first movie that we covered, which was it School Ties? It was School Ties. It was when we did School Ties. And I'm like, so I watched School Ties this morning, and I'm going to watch it again when we get home tonight so that I'm ready to talk about it. And my father said something to me that is going to spearhead probably part 2 of this episode, right? Or at least there's going to be a shift into discussing it. That Brendan Fraser, is he working anymore? Right? Like, it seems like he got blackballed out of Hollywood. Like, something happened with Me Too. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I proceeded to dress down my father with all of the information about Brendan Fraser that I have accumulated, not just over my lifetime, but over the past 5 years.
Yeah, specifically, right?
It's like,
Dad, we've done this thing for 5 years now. Don't tell me that you don't know what I'm...
And he's like, oh, wow, I didn't realize. I'm like, yeah, no, I know you didn't realize. But yeah, this is what I do, Dad. That's how I have the answers ready to go, is because I'm not half involved with Brendan Fraser History Month. I'm all in.
Oh, man. Yeah, so the only thing that I can think is that he must have been thinking back to 2018 when Fraser came out and opened up about an incident that had occurred to him 15 years prior to that in 2003, if I'm reading the references correctly here. He was approached and an incident occurred that has not been clarified, but for legal reasons has not been clarified, between him and the president of the Hollywood Foreign Press. and he only came out in 2018 about what had occurred, and that he felt it was time to finally talk about it, and because there were a lot of people that were opening up about these things then. And at the time, I think it was hard for a lot of people to take these stories seriously for a number of reasons, all of them horrible. Anytime somebody comes out about that stuff and you're not able to take them seriously, you have to really evaluate where you are in life when you start to say that kind of shit. But when it gets so far that Yahoo Sports is what's doing a write-up on why we need to take Brendan Fraser's sexual assault claim seriously, that's when we know that the world has kind of just like needed to take a second to reevaluate itself. But yeah, so as I said, for various reasons, his assault stuff was out there, and I won't say that it was ever questioned. I can't find anybody saying that they think that he's lying about it, but like the Hollywood Forward Press was just like, well, you know, it was meant as a joke, which is the weirdest response you can possibly have to sexual assault. Like, not only is it horrific in that you're writing off whatever that other person feels happened in that incident, but on top of that, like, it was supposed to be funny. Like, what? Like, what the fuck was it fucking punked? Was Ashton Kutcher supposed to jump out of a stall in the middle of this bathroom that he was getting assaulted in and being like, yo, we got you? Like, what the fuck was supposed to what joke is there? Like, anyway, so that's occurs.
Worse than denying it.
Right?
Like, because it's like, not only are we admitting that something happened by saying that, we're then saying, but he misinterpreted what was happening there. We meant it as a ha-ha, and he took it the wrong way. Okay, so you admit that he was sexually assaulted, but
right, that's exactly it. There is a level of just like, okay, so we know this thing happened then, right? So then there's the idea after that there definitely is a level of project that Brendan Fraser is no longer like brought back to, and people start to question, like, is this blacklisting? Like, and I think where your dad may have misinterpreted like some of these stories was he was not being blacklisted or blackballed or whatever phrase you want to use because of something he did. He was being blacklisted because he decided to talk about something that he shouldn't have, which I think a lot of people in this position definitely are starting to like come out now and talk about that, right? Like 5 years ago, we all opened up about these things that happened, and then guess what happened after that? We got mistreated yet again. Like, those stories are becoming all too common. And then as to add to that, like, it's just the way that the press, not the press. So I want to specifically make sure that I'm making this clear, that like internet, what's the word I'm looking for? Gossip. Internet gossip works, right? Is like it takes a little nugget of possible information, blows it up to a level that if you're on the internet all the time, suddenly you feel like that's the world. And we all have to remind ourselves that not everybody's on the internet all the time. like those of us that live in that world and those of us that are in these circles, you know, if you go to a subreddit every day, you start to think that what that subreddit says and does is indicative of the whole world, and you have to remind yourself that it's not.
I mean, weirdly, that's sort of the insight I bring to this show, because I'm afraid of the internet. And Siege is over there like, I got 3 condos. I'm thinking about knocking them down, building a hotel. And I'm like, that's cool. That's scary to me that you would want to invest in a hotel on the internet. I go around and I collect my 200 Bitcoin every time around. And then I end up having to pay it in luxury tax or take it to B&O Railroad.
The problem is I keep hanging around and I keep waiting to find the big bucks, like to latch onto that secret that it's gonna make me like some money or some success in some way. And I also have to admit that at any point that's not gonna happen. The internet is a fickle mistress.
The money to be made on the internet, the real money to be made on the internet, has come and gone. That bubble that we saw when we were kids, that so many of us are chasing because of that .com bubble. Imagine, right? We had a discussion today amongst family and friends about how zombie is it? Like that phrase.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And my thought was, I should register the website howzombieisit.com. And then we will be the people who you go to see how zombie a movie is.
Right.
And I'm like, but there's no money in that. That's such a niche market.
Yeah, not anymore.
Yeah.
15 years ago, if you bought any website that had the word zombie in it, you better believe that somebody was eventually going to knock on your door and ask to buy it from you, you know? But like that's just not the case anymore. But that's the thing. And you know, this kind of gets to the root of a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is like as a world, as a community of pop culture consumers, we have grown up a little bit over the last few years between the Me Too movement, COVID. Like there have been some major events that have shifted the way in which we consume pop culture. I like to think we have become smarter consumers, right? So like when stuff like this with Brendan Fraser happens, when he comes out and talks about this thing that happened to him at this point 20 years ago, we don't immediately blacklist that person. We don't immediately question everything about them. People will, but we as a community don't. And I think that that's what's super evident about that is this very year, we were not the only people to show our love for Brendan Fraser. There was a very noticeable uptick in the year of 2021 of people sharing things online of like, you know, hey, y'all remember George of the Jungle and how much we had fun with that? Or like Looney Tunes Back in Action. A lot of scuttlebutt about right now because of the new Space Jam coming out. Hard to ignore the fact that people are like, I already have the Space Jam sequel I wanted, and it's just like, okay, well, let's talk about why that's not a Space Jam sequel for a second. And also, more Space Jam is never a bad thing to siege in. So like, I don't want to start like saying we don't need the new Space Jam just because Looney Tunes Back in Action exists. Quite the opposite.
I mean,
all that does is make me hungrier for it.
We visited a universe in our very special episode this month where Brendan Fraser is what we did a cinematic universe podcast about rather than Adam Sandler. I want to let everybody know that there is a parallel universe out there where every May we would celebrate Space Jam History Month. That's what Siegen brought to the table. And I need to say that, you know, I think it's because Siegen's first name has an S and a J in it. That's it. I think that's why he loves Space Jam.
I was gonna say something that in retrospect is terrible, and now I have to say it because I've acknowledged it. I was gonna say something about Siege Jam, and then I thought, no, never mind. Cut that. ignore that concept entirely.
That was his first AOL screen name. Siege Jam 42069.
Oh man, I admitted to somebody today like weird things about me. I never had an aim growing up. And like their eyes bugged out as if I had told them that like I'd never touched a computer in my life. And I'm like, no, like I'm not gonna say that I'm like a troglodyte. Like I understand how the internet is a thing, and like I take part in like in internet culture and stuff like that. It was just never something that was on my radar. I just never had an aim.
That's so crazy to me because I had almost too many aims. Whenever I thought of like a good screen name, I would register it. And I was a big fan of making sure that there were no numbers in any of the screen names that I registered. And I would share them, but most of those screen names are secret aliases I use around the internet. Because I'm also a secret internet spy, right? I feel like this is the episode to release that in. And
if you're ever in an internet fight somewhere, you better believe Devin's looking in.
You know, and seeing if I got to get involved. But yeah, I know, but also, like, it's just one of those strange things. And the other thing to acknowledge is what Brendan Fraser has come out and said the reason why his career slowed down was breaking his back fixing that gazebo after Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah.
Which just, every time I say those words, it feels like I made this up. Everything I just said can't possibly be true, but that's what happened. He hurt himself, and it was difficult to get back to work after hurting himself.
Yeah, like, don't ever make fun of anybody that reads those magazines that are always like, celebrities, they're just like us. Because what those people are doing is they're making sure that they have that idea in their head so that when something horrible happens, they aren't swiftly reminded of that. Because the problem is that if you're not in that, if you're not reading about everyday things of like celebrities buy gelato too, just like you, like if that's not your mindset already, then the problem is that when shit like this happens, where like Brendan Fraser breaks his back fixing a gazebo after Katrina, or like on a whole more horrible level, like Anton Yelchin passes away because his car brakes fail while he's getting the mail, like that kind of shit. Like it snaps you back to this reality when you start realizing like, oh, like these people making these things and doing these and making these movies and in this world, making television, making music, like they also have just like normal lives otherwise. We just don't think about them like that, right? So like we like, I'm not going to deny the fact that we put Fraser on a pedestal for 1 month a year so that we can sit here and talk about movies and about movie culture in general and the way that it treats people at his level, where like, hey, you're good enough to be nominated for an actor, but not good enough for us to give you any respect the rest of the year is insane. But that is a level of celebritydom that exists in this world, right? And that's what I mean when I say that I think we've kind of grown past maybe that, is as I think we've kind of started to shed some of that attitude of like we're going to be shit to you 99% of the time, but every time you do something amazing, everybody's going to run to the room and act like you were their best friend. Ideally, we've grown past that, right? Because of things over the last half a decade or more. But in that, I think part of that movement is that realization that like also these are just dudes doing a job. And when we can get somebody that's really cool, like Fraser, that's just doing the job and like is good at it, but also is also a good human, that's something that we don't talk about enough until something horrible happens to that person, right? And that's not a way to go through life.
No, that's the wrong way to do it. It's one of those things where you should appreciate the storm while you're in it. Storm might be the wrong thing, but like you need to appreciate what you have before it's gone. And that's another driving force behind something like Brendan Fraser History Month, right? Yeah. And it's why I jokingly called the place where we congregated at the Fine Arts Building when we were both in university the Devin Decker Memorial Lounge. Because it's not it now, right? I'm still alive. I don't need a memorial. But on that time when I unfortunately pass, that's probably what they're going to call this place. Right?
So let's just remember me.
So just let's get a head start on that, right? Let's get the plaque made now.
Yeah, it's it's weird because like I said, we're 3, 4, 5 years out from a lot of like the Me Too stuff that occurred, and it was a necessary movement that was born out of an unnecessary predicament. Like people should not have been treated like that in the first place, but as they were, we needed something like Me Too to come in and start to correct it. And even then, it hasn't fixed it completely, and it never will. And we're going to have to keep working on it. Like, I don't want to act like because Me Too occurred, that means sexism and sexual assault in Hollywood is gone forever. Like, no. But there is a shift, right? There is a change. There is something that we have started to do that, and I think what's been really cool this particular year, looking back on the Brendan Fraser stuff of the last 5 years, is that like we kind of we picked an inoffensive figure that was still in the movement, so we could focus on all of that sort of stuff, and it wasn't weird for us to report or talk about it, while at the same time we get to now talk on the other end of it without feeling, like we've lost something over the last 5 years because of it. We just, I want to say we lucked out in choosing Brendan Fraser, but I feel like this was why you and I looked at Fraser from the get-go, right? Was because he was this person that was in this position, that was dealing with these experiences, and we were just like, we were just like, the guy just works. Like, and we appreciate the hell out of that. We didn't pick somebody like Adam Sandler, just another golden cow that we, that we still worship, right? But like, we didn't pick him as the guy that we focus on every year, because there's definitely something to be said about some of the problematic shit that dude has put on screen, right? And we don't shy away from that in our show about him specifically, but I would never say that like I put that guy up on a pedestal for 1 month a year. I will say that like I look back on that guy and have some definite like mixed feelings that need to be like borne out in front of everybody on air, but like not enough that I would dedicate like a month of my life specifically to him, right?
Yeah, I mean, just because you brought up Adam Sandler, the fact that Pete Davidson over the weekend said, I think I'm ready to hang up my jersey with SNL, and I would like my trajectory to follow that of Adam Sandler, my first response to that is, shit, Pete. Everybody would like their career to follow the trajectory of Adam Sandler, even if they weren't on SNL.
Mm-hmm.
Get to hang out with your buddies, doing what you love, like building a family in cinema, like getting to pitch ideas just so you can take your friends on vacation. Adam Sandler's kind of got it figured out. You're not breaking the mold by saying, I'd like to be the next Adam Sandler. Sorry,
Tell me you
Pete
want to be the
Davidson.
next John Lovitz, and we'll have a talk, Davidson.
Yeah, but it is. It's one of those things. And the crazy thing about picking Brendan Fraser was, I just picked somebody who I thought at the time was kind of innocuous, right? It was just, I don't really like this type of movie, was said by your co-host on Super Kenshi. And I'm like, oh, so like Brendan Fraser movies, right? Because it put it in there. And then when I started to do the research that very first day to put together our very first quiz about Brendan Fraser, which you can hear if you go back in our archives, we're not going to recreate that one again. Maybe 10 years down the line, but not for the 5-year anniversary. The stuff is still too fresh. That's when I really realized just how much he did. Like, the fact that Brendan Fraser has so many cameos that are uncredited throughout cinema history in the 90s blows my mind. 90s and beyond, let's be completely honest.
Yeah, Joe, man. Like it's one of my favorite moments when he pops up and and it's all because it's directed by the dude that did the Mummy.
The Mummy guy.
Is it? It's not.
It's Joel Silver.
Joel Silver, is that? Yeah. But I mean, like he's a big fan of I'm not up to anything. You want me to show up for 5 minutes on set? Just buy me some coffee and a sandwich. We'll call it even. And like that attitude of just like, I like to be working, I like to be doing stuff, and I like working with the people that I like working with, has permeated so much of his work from the get-go. I mean, like, you talk about, him showing up in movies, and as we talked about this very month, it starts with Encino Man, which is his first, big credited role.
Yeah.
It is literally from his first character that he starts that trend of just, showing up to work.
Right. I mean, the really crazy one is that he shows up in Glory Days, with Ben Affleck, because they show up together in school ties. Like, that is, hey, you want to come be in this? I'm surprised, honestly, with all of the crossover between School Ties and Dazed and Confused, he doesn't have some cameo in that.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be weird for him to be Link, but just somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's when you start to mention that, it's weirder that there's an absence of Fraser than when he shows up. You're saying something, right?
Yeah, it speaks to the thing. And also, to go back to the Space Jam thing, because I derailed it, Space Jam 2, or whatever it's called, I don't know what it's called. I just know that I'm going to watch it when it comes to HBO Max later this year, because Sejan's going to make me. There's going to be There's going to be a comeuppance for me forcing Sejan to record a 4-hour episode of Justice League. I know that. And I know that my comeuppance is Space Jam 2. I know. I'm ready to pay that piper. But Space Jam 2 feels very Ready Player One, just to be the worst type of person in the world, where they're trying to shove in as many references as possible.
There's definitely that attitude behind it. I don't think that's an unfair comparison to make at the moment, until we see them. The bigger one that I would compare it to, just because Ready Player One kind of falls on its face in a lot of ways, is in the hopes that it is a successful movie, Space Jam: The New Batch, or whatever they're calling it. I want to say it's more like it's more like the end of the Lego movies, Lego Movie and Lego Batman, where you get a ton of those Warner Brothers references that get to show up because Warner Brothers owns them and they want that kind of humor in it.
Right. Well, what I was going to say is that the foundation for all those people showing up in Space Jam comes from Looney Tunes Back in Action. So as much as it's weird to look at Space Jam and then look at Looney Tunes Back in Action as a semi-sequel to it, right?
Yeah. Even
Sejan and I were having that debate mere seconds before I hit the record button on this episode, where it's kind of a sequel, but the Muppet movie sequel, I believe, was your Your direct
Yeah, well,
quote.
and so the movies, so there's a ton of Muppet movies, and not all of them are direct sequels to other ones, right? So like I grew up, the Muppet movie for me, not the Muppet movie, but the Muppet movie for me was Great Muppet Caper. I love that one, where like the joke about Fozzie and Kermit being brothers is amazing. The scene where Piggy has to break into John Cleese's house to pretend she lives there is classic cinema to me. I mean, Grodin, who just passed away this month,
Yeah.
like. Like, guy was one of the angriest men in Hollywood, but I still remember a ton of movies of his that like really like formed me growing up. Clifford and Beethoven will always be like major rental memories for me. Um, but yeah, like that, like so that movie is the Muppet movie in my family, right? And so to call that a sequel to the Muppet movie, or to Muppets Take Manhattan, or to call it a prequel to the Muppets and the Muppets Most Wanted is not that. No, that like the story is not, that's not why that's there. They're just characters within that story that just happen to all be made up of Muppets. And it's that it, and for me, Back in Action feels like that's what like Looney Tunes and Warner Brothers wants us to like. That's how they want us to start thinking about the Looney Tunes. If they could have made another Looney Tunes live action mix movie that wasn't a Space Jam sequel sometime in the last 10 years, I bet they probably would have. I like, it's just they want their cake and they want to eat it too, just like that. And so if Space Jam the Arrival, what is the name of this one? A New Legacy, that's the name of it.
It's
I
a
just
new
remembered it.
legacy.
Yeah, Space Jam, A New Legacy. Yeah.
Wow, that's a terrible title. How you
Well,
starting a new
so
legacy? How can you tell me
because
it's going to be a
I think they want it
legacy?
to be, well, I think they want it to be the reboot, right? Like the idea that like we're gonna revamp this idea that the Looney Tunes are not just like a world that you visit. They are a batch of characters that we can use in any way that we want.
I mean, that would certainly explain what they've been doing over the past few years, trying to sanitize the image of the original Looney Tunes.
Yeah, I take issue with that because Warner Brothers was also one of the first ones to put out things like full DVD collections with warnings at the front. Like Disney, I will give you the act of sanitization and the idea of erasing certain parts of their history. Disney has been pretty horrific at that up until recently. The last few years, they've definitely changed their tune on that. But I think what Disney has done to change their tune is pick up on a lot of the stuff that Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes learned much earlier than them. Is you can't erase this stuff. You can put it behind a wall. You can definitely brick it up like in Edgar Allan Poe style. Like you could say like, oh, we have it. It's there. It's alive. You can hear it if you put your ear to the wall. But we hope it dies sometime soon. It's definitely something you could call them out on. But to say that they've like completely ignored it and erased it, that they were the first ones to try and preserve some of their more problematic stuff.
I'm going to give you props for making a black cat Edgar Allan Poe reference and not just a Telltale Heart one. Like, seriously. I mean, mostly because in my head it's Penelope Pussycat who's behind that wall, all bricked up. And on the one hand, she's happy because Pepe Le Pew can't get to her. On the other hand, she's slowly dying of asphyxiation and starvation.
But yeah, man, like I would not accuse them of erasure. Definitely an attempt to make you kind of like the first thing that they'll say to you is, we're not like that anymore. we used to be like this. That's really problematic, but we're not like that anymore. And you're just like, okay, but like we can't ignore this.
Yeah, I kind of have to give you guys that. You haven't done a new Pepe Le Pew or Speedy Gonzales cartoon in 50 years. So, yeah. You guys learned. But yeah, it's that though. But Back in Action, that's an important step for going forward. And Brendan Fraser was there for it. I mean, you wouldn't have Scoob last year trying to bring together a whole Hanna-Barbera universe if you didn't have, because Shaggy and Scooby show up weirdly in Back in Action. But not that weirdly when you consider that they're also owned by Warner Brothers. It's all crazy. It's all nuts. Does AT&T not own HBO anymore? Did they get rid of them?
I don't know, man. They went through a lot of weird stuff because they had also bought Yahoo at some point and lost Yahoo. Well, I say lost, but like foisted off Yahoo on somebody else at some point. It's like the Apex Group or some nonsense now that owns them.
Yeah.
So like I feel like AT&T, I think what happened is they probably like merged and changed. It's not that they don't own Warner Brothers anymore, it's that they're not called AT&T anymore.
It was just so weird because I've like heard like the tiniest little whisperings about there being a shakeup with Warner Media and who owns it and all that, and it was AT&T for so long. But then I can't find anything that like supports that that's actually what happened. I can only hear the rumors.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I know within the last couple of years they did lose things like all of their like Yahoo stuff and things like that, and it was a huge deal for them, for some reason to lose Yahoo News and Yahoo Questions and all that. It's why Yahoo Questions died this year, is because whoever it is that's currently owns them has decided it's not worth putting the money into. But AT&T understood the good value of a good congregate website.
Like I was thinking about that watching Flashdance, where I'm like, oh, this is something I'd like to ask the internet, but I can't do that anymore because Yahoo Questions is gone. Not that I didn't even really know of its existence until it was going away. Let's just be honest. But yeah, it's one of those things. And also, since we talked about the Hollywood Foreign Press, the Golden Globes, I think those are done, right? Based upon some allegations against the Hollywood Foreign Press. So
I don't think we're gonna see the end of the Golden Globes. What you'll see is they'll break off into like their own thing, or somebody else will come in and buy them, and it'll be a huge deal. It'll be possibly billion-dollar contracts that will be in the works on that one. But we out of all of the award shows to lose, if we lost the Golden Globes, that would be honestly kind of the biggest punch to fans, because I think out of all of them, it is the one that reflects the audience more than it does anything else. And it's not perfect. I don't mean to say that it's like, but even like People's Choice is so far off the rails because nowadays you have like trolls and assholes that are just like to like fuck with stuff. So then you end up with people that end up in there because a bunch of dudes on 4chan decided they wanted to support something, and that is nonsense. So you kind of lost like the true like fan choice type of awards to that assholery. And then the other direction, you have stuff like the Oscars, where it's so far up its own ass that they're not letting people into their gated community that it's super upsetting to see the stuff that does get picked doesn't get picked, why it gets picked, guys openly admitting that they've never watched the movies they voted for, but their family liked it, so what the fuck. Is like that's not the point, guys. Like at the very least, keep that part quiet. Like so the Golden Globes is like kind of rests right in the middle there, where it feels like there's a little bit of a fan service to it, where like it's like, hey, we understand that this may not have been the best acted movie of the year, but it's definitely the one that you all watched the most and talked about the most, so like we should acknowledge that. And I think to lose that, it means that you'd lose everything. Like if the Golden Globes disappears, I don't think the Oscars makes it. I don't think, you know what I mean? Like I don't think, hell, the MTV Movie Awards, which are already pretty pointless at this point, I think they've literally turned it into the MTV Movie and Television Awards, and then they spent 30% of their time this year on their own reality television rather than on any movies or actual television. Like,
I mean, any award show, right? And the biggest offender of this, the one that everybody points to, is like the Game Awards. But every award show is basically a 3-hour advertising package. And the difference between every other award show and the Golden Globes is that the Golden Globes were still kind of fun.
Right.
I mean, like when this show first started, we did Oscar episodes. We did episodes where we guessed what we thought were going to win at the Academy Awards. And then like the bloom went off that rose as it became like less fun. That show just became less fun to watch.
Well, I mean, like I can't speak for you, but I mean, a huge push for me to get away from that stuff was with a lot of the Me Too stuff that started happening. I mean, I'm sure that you can go back and see that we stopped really kind of focusing on it even before that. But the thing that kind of solidified that we made the right choice to not pay attention to the Oscars anymore was a ton of the stuff that happened with the Me Too movement, and specifically Weinstein. Like there was so much wrapped up in the idea that rather than open their doors, let everybody in to talk about what had happened and to kind of come clean about a ton of stuff, problems that are in the industry, like the Oscars was one of those places where it was so on display that what they were going to do was fortify. they literally were going to close the gates, like, and put up, they were going to put up fucking guards in their gated community and not let anybody in for a while until this shit settled down. Not even got straightened out or figured out. They weren't going to solve the problem. They were just going to wait until everybody went away. So yeah, man. I don't know if we ever really openly talked about why we were just not going to do it anymore. But for me, that was definitely a huge part of it.
I mean, for me, I missed watching it one year, and I joked about daytime television maybe putting fluoride in the radio waves that they're delivering to it, but they definitely do that with the Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something about it that if you're watching it and you see it, it gears you up to want to do it again. Yeah. And not that I did, like, I can't say that some of those, like, award seasons when I would be crisscrossing New England trying to find a theater that was playing something that was nominated. And I mean, like, documentaries or short form live action, like things that it's generally difficult to locate. But having that day where I went to Hartford, Connecticut, and bought 2 tickets, one for short form animation, one for short form live action, and then also got to see some foreign film, Un Deux Nuits, One Day, Two Nights, the Marion Cotillard that she was nominated for Best Actress.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is a great film, foreign film that, like, I wouldn't have seen otherwise. Like, I just packed so much into a day in Hartford, and then also between movies exploring the city and finding interesting places to eat and to, like, just pass time until my next film. Like, I'm thankful to the Oscars for that, but I'm also thankful for not sitting in front of my television for 3+ hours just to be told what I should have liked.
Yeah, it's a weird attitude that comes off of that. Like, and this I know we have talked about, so I don't want to dwell on it for too long. But the ways in which the Oscars has become, or had become, kind of like the dictator of what was and wasn't good cinema, what you should and shouldn't have been bothering with throughout the year, was becoming super problematic for us specifically. Like, I'm sure other people also feel this way, and I'm sure there's some people out there that disagree. Like, they don't have time for 20 movies a year, so if they can get anybody to tell them the one movie they should bother to see, they appreciate that, and that is what it is. And but it's the same way that like it's the same growing up and realization that I had to do with things like Rotten Tomatoes, and Metacritic, right? It's the same way that I had to come to terms with the fact that, like I said, like, going to like movie subreddits, like, those guys are not the end all be all dictation of what I should and shouldn't be doing with my time. And like, and I'll, to bring this back around to Brendan Fraser and Brendan Fraser History Month, it's been really fun to have a month dedicated to these movies that I know people don't watch on a regular basis, wouldn't watch if we didn't mention them. Even if they don't listen to our show, they listen to us talking about making this particular month, and they go and they do things. You talked about your mom and your dad finally sitting down and watching Doom Patrol, which they wouldn't have otherwise, because we wouldn't have come back to Doom Patrol season 1 like we did. And so, it's been fun to kind of pull apart the pieces of that machine over the last few years of that has dictated what people should and shouldn't be seeing, to see how it worked, use it a little bit ourselves, but at the same time recognize that system is flawed. Like, y'all should go watch what you want to watch. If there's one lesson that comes out of Brendan Fraser History Month for everybody, it's not that you should go see every Brendan Fraser movie ever made. It's not that you have to become a fan of Brendan Fraser instantly, although I hope you do. Our point is like, you should go like what you like. And that's kind of something we try and say throughout the year on Say Report. But the reason that we celebrate this month like we do is to really highlight that idea that, like, nobody should dictate to you what is and isn't a good movie, a good actor, a good script. You should be able to enjoy what you want to enjoy, right? And that's always been one of our tenets.
Exactly. And another big thing, just to tie it all into the Oscars, that episode where we finally talked about Crash, and the hubbub around the Oscars, as long as I can remember, like, being in conversations about the Oscars, is that Crash was the biggest, like, miscarriage of award that the Oscars ever did. Like, it didn't deserve it. It just somehow caught the attention of the Academy and won because of that. And inherently, that argument is hyper flawed. The argument that, like, well, it just grabbed onto the zeitgeist and was popular, so that's why it won Best Picture that year. Well, that's kind of the competition, isn't it? Isn't that what you're trying to do?
Every year, right? Yeah, isn't that what dictates the movie winning that award every year?
But then specifically, that year that we watched Crash, the amount of movies that were very similar to Crash that came out, and eventually Green Book is the movie that wins. And it's like, isn't that sort of the same sort of thing as Crash was exploring, just without a huge ensemble? Like, isn't the person that you're like, oh, that guy was in that movie, where you're thinking like, oh, Brendan Fraser is going to be in an Academy Award movie, the fact that it was Peter Farrelly directing Green Book? Like, what?
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah. So in addition to the fact that on paper they are both exploring the same ideas of race and all that, then add to that the behind the scenes stuff going on in that movie, where people are just like, unexpectedly this person is making this kind of film, you should really pay attention. And it's just like, oh, okay. So yeah, like all around, like so much of that movie feels like the same ways in which we explored Crash that year. Was wild.
Yeah, it's just that it's like, but everybody points at that shouldn't have won, and it feels like, again, I've sort of removed myself from the conversations. The last award show related conversation I had with strangers, because you're not a stranger, you're family, and all of our listeners, they're family. But like, I went to a Rhode Island Film Collaborative meeting in Providence because I'm like, maybe I want to get more involved. Spoilers, that was a mistake. And I had just come from seeing Kong Skull Island, which I loved. I still love Kong Skull Island. And I wish that the original Godzilla, like, remake or reboot movie with Bryan Cranston had made me care about kaiju movies the way that Kong Skull Island did.
Yeah.
Like, Kong Skull Island is the reason I saw King of the Monsters and then Godzilla vs. Kong.
Yeah.
Because of that. That first Godzilla movie with Kick-Ass and Scarlet Witch and, Walter White, I couldn't tell you anything that happens in that movie. I know that there's a meltdown of a nuclear power plant, but that's because a lot of people were like, is it too soon to be doing this after the meltdown at the nuclear power plant in Japan?
Yeah, after Fukushima, yeah.
Like,
well, and but you talk about Bryan Cranston being in that movie, but I feel it's my duty to point out to everybody is that he's only in the first like 20 minutes of that film.
Bryan Cranston dies within 15 minutes of the movie.
And yet that movie was sold on, hey, this is what he's doing after Breaking Bad. Yeah. Oh, man. Sorry.
But then also the fact that the twins from Age of Ultron, Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen, they're going to be married in this one. And like, that's when Pornhub opened up a new section of of incest porn. They're like, Game of Thrones kinda, but this movie's doing it? Sorry. But yeah, man. It's one of those. So, but I had just come fresh from seeing Kong Skull Island, and I got into a fight with somebody about the movie Silence by Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was riding a high from the stupid monster movie that I just saw that had Loki and Captain Marvel in it, and Dan Connor as the guy funding the whole expedition. And then you want to talk about Silence and tell me that it was awful, and then tell me, oh, but I walked out halfway through. Like, oh, so you watched all the setup and none of the payoff. So, of course you didn't like that movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I like I said, like you should be able to enjoy the movies you want to enjoy in the way you want to enjoy them. So that even extends to like, if you want to walk out of a movie because you're just not feeling it halfway through, that's fine. You don't get to do that and then walk into a film society meeting and talk about what trash it is. And it's like, okay, wait, like take 2 steps back here. You didn't enjoy the movie, you didn't finish it. Maybe the first thought should be like, why does everybody else feel like this is a movie worth seeing and talking about? Because I didn't enjoy it. If that's the way he approached you, that's a very different conversation, right? And and again, like I feel like that's one of the big things that I have personally like learned over doing this for the last 5 years, is doing this month of being like, okay, let's come to the table, let's talk about Monkey Bone, and let's talk about why it didn't work for us, but why, like, why does it still, why does it still exist in the world? Why do people still reference it? Why do people come back to it, right? Like do people come back to it? Maybe they don't. Like, let's talk about Crash. Let's talk about School Ties. Let's talk about these movies that people hold up as these like these pinnacles of like very good filmmaking, but then everything in them people want to just rip apart. You know, like we talked at School Ties about Frasier because it is that time of the month, but like for a long time it was real hard for Ben Affleck and Matt Damon to get out of that attitude as well, like, right, to break out from that. It took Good Will Hunting for them to stop talking about them as the boys in School Ties.
And when Good Will Hunting hit, like, the reason that I was aware of School Ties,
right,
like, because I had seen it, but it was just one of those things, was these guys just won Oscars, and they were the guys in School Ties.
right.
And then working at Blockbuster, the like thing, like the Blockbuster TV, which I have a copy of a Blockbuster TV, and that might be a fun idea for an episode someday, is to just live in that world and comment on that. I found a disc of it in my house, and I feel like I'm past the statute of limitations to get in trouble, right? There is no Blockbuster Video anymore.
Well, there's the one. There's that one. But no, yeah, I doubt they'd be the ones to come after you, considering.
Imagine. The only reason that we're still in business is because of you, Devin. You're welcome? I don't... You're... but it's like, when they were talking about, I think it was Ben Affleck in Daredevil, and they're like, oh, you might remember Ben Affleck from Good Will Hunting, but you first saw him with Matt Damon in School Ties. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I did. I remember that. Weird to talk about that movie and Daredevil, but really, were those people blind to David being Jewish because they didn't want to see it?
Oh, boo.
Oh,
man.
Cowards.
Why didn't Link show up in Daredevil? So
Dude, well then, like, you bring up Monkey Bone. Let's talk about the fact that Rose McGowan and Brendan Fraser reconnected on camera again for the first time in a way that I didn't even realize at the time, that when we were watching Monkey Bone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forget. You forget that David Morgan in friggin' Encino Man has a family. Because they have one scene, and in that scene, it's pretty much Pauly Shore stealing the show. And Richard Mazur is there. Like, what? How does Pauly Shore steal this scene from Richard Mazur? But he does.
Yeah.
But
I mean, like I am really pleased with the last 5 years, and you know, God knows, tomorrow we could find out a whole bunch of horrible shit about everybody that we've talked about today, and everything will change. And like, that's something that that's another thing that I also had to come to terms with when we decided we were going to start putting our voices to recorded media and hold on to it in perpetuity. It was just also the idea that at some point I was going to sound like an asshole. So day one, I just made sure I immediately sounded like one.
Yeah. I mean, adaptability, that's sort of the everything that we're about. Adaptability is built into being a show like this,
for sure. And adaptability, admittedly, that superpower comes from a place of privilege. Like, we can't deny that.
Oh, yeah,
like,
no,
like we are able to be adaptable for a lot of reasons that people in this world are not necessarily. But like, you know, it allows us to continue to do this show and to talk about these things, and to dedicate a month to an actor that, if other shows attempted this, they wouldn't last as long. You know, things like that. We've been extremely lucky, but part of that has been that I think that we were very smart into who we hitched our wagon to early on with this celebration every year.
Super true. I will agree with that. I had something about adaptability or whatever. Oh, it was Airheads, right? We're also the first people to admit if we said something or that. And while it was an alternate universe version of us in that very special episode, right? We were listening to something pre-recorded from another world, universe 12368. they mentioned the Reagan Youth song at the end, Degenerated, and then they questioned whether or not it was actually the Lone Rangers who are performing it, and it is.
Amazing.
It is actually Brendan Fraser singing and stuff, because someone had gotten in touch with us that that's not really a Reagan Youth song, and I'm like, no, it is, but it's a cover. Like, it's not them singing it, but it's a song. It's from the band Reagan Youth. Like, you can't deny that is a Reagan Youth song. It's just not Reagan Youth who are performing it at that time. And then to gear up for that discussion with someone is when I realized that, oh no, that's Brendan Fraser's voice. And it is performed by the Lone Rangers.
Amazing.
And based on everything that I found on the film, there wasn't some dummy band for the Lone Rangers. It's not one of those Kay Hanley as the voice of Josie in Josie and the Pussycats.
For sure. Well, I mean, that's the only time in the movie that they sing. It'd be a real waste of talent to get somebody else, especially because, man, yeah, let's talk about this for a couple of seconds. Especially because I don't ever get the impression in that movie that they're supposed to be good. And I don't mean to say that the song at the end is not enjoyable and good like hard rock. It is raw. And I think that is actually more important to the story. I would much rather that it be them and it be raw than it be some pre-recorded other rock band of the era playing a Reagan Youth song, making it sound better than it actually should be. I think it's more important to me that it actually be them and it be raw. So from like an artistic standpoint, a much better choice and decision.
Right. And also, if you've ever listened to the song by Reagan Youth, is so different. Like, they did a really good job of making it sound like it came from a band calling themselves the Lone Rangers.
From the early 90s. Yeah.
Like, it's impressive. It's an impressive little piece. But I did, because someone came and said, well, it's not Reagan Youth who's doing that. And like, no, it's not them who's performing. It's definitely not Reagan Youth who's performing that song. But it's a song by Reagan Youth. Degenerated is a Reagan Youth song. That you can't deny that.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's like All Along the Watchtower and saying, well, that's not a Jimi Hendrix song. Well, yeah, okay, there's technicalities around that. But when we say this, there is a song that when I say this, and this person, that came from that place. Oh, man. God, yeah, man, I'm really pleased. This month has been a good one. The celebration of Brendan Fraser has been a good one. The last 5 years have been really good to us, and this is just another place for us to just celebrate that.
So looking forward, what do you think Brendan Fraser History Month is going to be? Like, do you have any thought? I mean, like I said, I'm so excited to take off the Brendan Fraser History Month cap and like get back. There's so many things. Next week's episode, right? The next episode of the Say Report is going to be a doozy, because we have been collecting lists of all the things we wanted to talk about that were not related to Brendan Fraser, and we're going to address them all next week. And after this episode, I'm going to talk to Siegen about the format that I want to do that in. So that's it. But, looking a year ahead, and it's a year away, so it's malleable. Is there like a Brendan Fraser movie that we haven't talked about that you do want to explore? Is there something specific, like thematically, about his films that you think might be interesting as just a way to dive back into the Fraser-verse next May?
I mean, I think that we would be remiss if we did not finish off looking at some of the movies that we have not touched on yet, and the first one that comes to mind is Blast from the Past.
Yeah, I think I made a slight reference to it in one of the earlier ones. I saw Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Long Haul, the weird fourth movie in the series where Alicia Silverstone becomes the mom and Tom Everett takes over for Steve Zahn in A Thing You Do switcheroo. And that was the closest we got to it. But yeah, that's a good point. Blast from the Past, especially whenever I talk about Brendan Fraser History Month, I'll dedicate that episode to my mother, because she's like, what's that one with Christopher Walken? How have you guys not done that movie yet?
Yeah. you know, and there's been ones that we've also joked about. I mean, like I joke all the time about furry vengeance, right? But like we should definitely take a look at that one sometime. Kind of like the late the late career leading man comedy, physical shtick comedy that he tries to do, and it almost feels kind of Monkey Bone-esque in that same way, right? Like, so we can talk about that. I mean, we never touched on what's the we talked about George of the Jungle so much, we never talk about Dudley Do-Right, right? Like we should look at
Dudley
that one.
Do-Right is the one. If there was a Brendan Fraser movie that people ask me about more than any other Brendan Fraser movie, it's Dudley Do-Right.
Yeah, so I mean, like, there's specific movies that we need to talk about, but also I'm very interested to see what he does over the next coming years. We've kind of offhandedly mentioned the Darren Aronofsky project that he's currently involved in, The Whale, which is just going to be weird, but if you know, it's going to be another one like Crash, where like he does this project with a big director, a lot of people pay attention to it.
Yeah, and is this going to be his wrestler?
And then we have to listen to everybody for the next like year talk about like, man, I've never really liked Brendan Fraser, but that one movie, and it's like you say this every 5 years. Every 5 years he makes a movie and everybody's just like, I don't really like him that much, but man, that one movie. At this point, we've got to stop having that conversation.
We just need to celebrate him the way we celebrate him every May.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I mean, there is definitely stuff to come that we need to keep an eye out for, but we're not at the end of our rope yet as far as like projects he has worked on. Like there's definitely some stuff we still have to dive into that are maybe in the deeper recesses of the storeroom that I have here of all of my Fraser flicks, but they're in there, so we have to look at them.
Yeah, Fort Fraser has a lot of things to examine, but the only promise I can make is that Gods and Monsters will not happen until year 7 or beyond.
I can I don't know your reasoning, but I can appreciate that.
Because I can only do a movie like that starring Brendan Fraser every so often. Mm-hmm. Like there's a reason why it took so long for us to look at School Ties after Crash.
Sure. Yeah.
Like
sure.
That 5-year window that you spoke of, like it's important to give it that weird buffer there.
Yeah. Maybe year 8 we can finally do the uncredited movies where he just shows up.
I can't wait to do like that's gonna be a weird Brendan Fraser History Month. Like Brendan Fraser, like adjacent because he's just there.
And we get to drop names like Dickie Roberts and stuff like that. Like, come on.
We get to watch Now and Then.
Yeah.
Like, did you ever think that the Say Report would cover Now and Then?
Guess what?
There's only one way. And it's if Brendan Fraser happened to show up in it, uncredited for some reason. Yeah. And also, I have to watch the third Mummy movie. The fact that I've never seen Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, like that needs to come on down the line.
Maybe year 6 is the leftovers for us, right? Like whatever is still on the plate that we should have done the last few years. That maybe that's what next year is.
Ooh, I like that. I think that's good, and then we can look for other stuff. But like it is, I just wanted to make sure that this isn't the end, right? This weird kind of low energy reflection on 5 years of Brendan Fraser films. This is not the end of Brendan Fraser films being explored every May.
I think dramatic, low energy finisher for 5 years of Brendan Fraser is doing Brendan Fraser right.
Yeah, it's his trust. Let's be honest. All right. So anything that you'd like to add before we send this one off to the vault? I mean, I am exhausted. I am Brendan Fraser exhausted. We watched a full season of Doom Patrol. And
yeah, I mean, like, yeah, so this year, like, let's just do a quick retrospective on just exactly what we did this year, because we've mentioned a lot of movies.
Yeah.
But we finally did Encino Man and Encino Woman, to be fair. That was what the episode was all about. We did Doom Patrol Season 2. We did School Ties. And we did Airheads, right?
Yeah.
Am I forgetting one?
No, that's it. Those are the ones. I mean, we slant did Airheads, right? I wouldn't be surprised if the Say Report tackles Airheads again. Maybe in another form of media. Maybe start following the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe wherever podcasts are found.
Yes.
Right? Especially since the ASCU, we're coming to the finale of our first season. So it's the time to binge everything that came before. Yeah. And then on June 11th, in addition to The Green Knight coming out in theaters, will drop our Hubie Halloween
Thanks for that reminder.
season finale of season 1 of Adam Sandler Cinematic
It'll
Universe.
be a scary day for everybody. Us, Dev Patel, it'll be great. Yeah, man. So pay attention to that. But yeah, out of those movies that we did this year, you know, like I am pretty confident in saying, like first of all, Doom Patrol. We stand firmly behind that show here, right? So definitely go and check that out. I think that School Ties deserves a watch from everybody still. I think it's one that not only holds up, but still has important stuff to say. So definitely check that out. Enter the Encino verse at your own risk. If you're that kind of person, you probably already know that about yourself, and so go for it. But it is a comedy from the early 90s. And let that just be the last words I say on it.
Yeah. I before we rewatched Encino Man, I would be all about, if you're going to join us on these historical visits to Brendan Fraser's career, have to start with Encino Man. It's sort of like it's the Garden of Eden of Brendan Fraser History Month. I'm a changed man. And really, that's why the Say Report is so different from religion, because adaptability. That's right, I said it. Come get me, Vatican. But where it really needs to start is where it started for me, and that's Airheads. Airheads is such an important Brendan Fraser film, especially when you consider all of the other like veins of Hollywood that come together with that film. Because Brendan Fraser goes off from that and becomes Brendan Fraser. He does George of the Jungle. He does The Mummy. He does Blast from the Past. He becomes that actor. Adam Sandler goes off from Airheads and starts what we call the Sandlerverse. Billy Madison is a year out from that, and everything there. And then Steve Buscemi, right? Even though he had been appearing in Coen Brother films long before a film like Airheads came along, 2 years later, he's in Fargo. And he becomes that like, guy who was in Fargo.
Yeah, he becomes the funny-looking fella. It's and on top of that, at least according to these two knuckleheads, like insanely rewatchable. Like more than. Whereas Encino Man is one to watch if you're in the mood to watch it. Like if you're prepped for that kind of like experience, Airheads. As you mentioned, we will probably do again at some point. Like we will do it ourselves versus our counterparts, right? And like I am ready to. I am happy to. If you told me, hey, next week we're gonna do this, I would watch it this weekend, like to get prepared. Like so just to kind of just wrap up the movies that we watched this season, this year for Brendan Fraser history. Couple of misses, but one or two that I would definitely say are just like choice.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean, just because I'm saying it starts with Airheads, School Ties definitely has some value to see how Brendan Fraser gets put on that path. And really, if you're going to do Encino Man, maybe couple it with School Ties, as weird as that's going to be, and do Encino Man first, the way that the world experienced it, because he was in School Ties, and they expected that to be a certain type of film. They expected that to be, this is going to be the Dead Poets Society of the 90s, and it's going to tell you all the men you should be looking out for in starring roles.
Yep.
It's the Brat Pack meets Dead Poets Society. You're welcome. And then you see Encino Man somehow comes out first. And, we know how things go from there. But it is not until Brendan Fraser finally gets to share a scene with a member of the Brat Pack, Judd Nelson, in Airheads, that one of those candles of the future of Hollywood cinema movie making ignites.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Good shit. Good shit this
crazy.
Year.
I love it. These are movies that, a lot of these are ones that, like, I know we have to do them, but I'm not mentally prepared. Like, this is where I would have started at the beginning of Brendan Fraser History Month, but I think we would have been burnt out if we tried to watch them before we knew everything about it. Mm-hmm. And that's the last thing that I want to focus on, is if you're looking at an actor and their career and everything that they've done and contributed to society. Take in as much as you can, right? Don't judge anybody on just one performance, and don't judge anybody in the real world on just one performance. There are some performances that, yes, are despicable and should not be forgiven, but like, just because you didn't like Brendan Fraser and Encino Man, that doesn't mean that you can't watch him in Crash and say, oh wow, I understand now. Does that make sense? Did I lose the thread there?
No, man, I'm with you.
Yeah. All right. Anything else that you want to say before we send this one off?
Nope.
All right. Excellent. Me either. So, if you would like to contribute to us the Brendan Fraser films you feel are left over and might be in consideration for year 6 of Brendan Fraser History Month with the Say Report, you can get me on Twitter at Devin D. Decker.
And if you want to hit me up and argue with me about Reagan Youth songs, I'm always up for a good gab. Hit me up at Siege versus the World.
Seriously, Siegen loves punk music. That's his secret shame. And he wants to hear all about your thoughts and theories.
Shame nothing, but yeah, definitely. No, hit me up. We want to talk about who did songs first and who owns what, and the idea that punk would argue nobody owns anything, fucker. Like, let's do it.
I love it. Also, I'm a big fan of all of the heavy metal music that later became pop songs. Hey Kitty, Yusufan, you blow my mind. When I first heard that, it blew my mind. But hey, that's a discussion for another day. Thank you all for joining us during Brendan Fraser History Month. We will return to regular shows about everything next month. But until then, Will, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Siegen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.